You've been involved with broadcasting architecture your entire life. Can you talk about that?
I mean, I think that if you're passionate about what you do, and if you really believe that that it's infuriatingly interesting, you can't keep silent about it. I've never been able to keep silent about anything. And I've been an architecture enthusiast since I was about 11, and I've enthused about it. And I think you use any means that you have available. One is aware from a very early time that architecture is a difficult territory to really explain.
Yes.
I was saying to my students this morning that I said, in a funny way, I regard architecture as a sort of sophisticated bullshit. I mean, there's no real criteria for architecture.
Yes.
We've invented them. It's a series of invented systems which groups of people will recognize, criteria which groups of people will recognize, value systems emerge, but they're actually objectively quite difficult to justify.
Yes.
Doesn't mean they're not marvelous. And the rest of it is intriguingness, and I think that architecture is very intriguing. And that needs to be talked about. I always say that if you're really interested in architecture, you can stand at a bus stop and look across the street and see some third-rate building and say, that's interesting. That guy was trying to do so and so, and probably was influenced by that, and that's terrible, but it's terrible in an interesting way. I mean, I can even sit in this completely bland room we're here in now, and somewhere there'll be something and say, that was a funny move.
Yeah.
And that intrigues me.
Are there any cities that you're fascinated with?
Yes. I'm always fascinated by Berlin, which I find easy to extrapolate with London. I'm in love with LA still after 35 years, which I much prefer to New York. And I'm fascinated by places that you didn't expect to be much good. Second cities are fascinating. Gothenburg is more fascinating in some ways than Stockholm, and Stockholm is more beautiful. Antwerp's more interesting than Brussels. You see? There's cities that irritate me intensely. I think there's some cities that are very pleased with themselves. Of which, it's loaded, but Jerusalem is very pleased with itself. Whereas Tel Aviv is loose-limbed. Edinburgh is very pleased with itself, but Glasgow is very loose-limbed. I think there's a series of those. Rome is very pleased with itself, but Milan is loose-limbed. And I always prefer the loose-limbed city. I prefer the loose-limbed cities, which often produce better architecture, because they've got nothing to lose.
Somebody wrote that with your work in the 60s that fun, pleasure, entertainment were things that you explored to look at the epistemology of fun, the epistemology of pleasure.
No, I think that's kind of over philosophizing. I think I enjoy cheerfulness. I want normal life to be cheerful. I like the slight amusements of normal things, not searching for fun or dealing with fun per se. Immediately gets embarrassing once you put it like that. But to sort of see the side of it is much more interesting, and the fact that a commonplace condition or a sensible building, etc., can have wry aspects, I find very amusing. My basic attitude to this is also that architecture is essentially theatre. Even the most dour architecture is theatre.
Speaking of theatrics, you were responsible for one of the most theatrical events in architecture with Archigram magazine. A lot of volumes readers weren't born then. So what is pop?
I think pop is a definable period of consciousness about Americana, about low culture to some extent, things that would upset your mother, and very, very little chit-chat, very little way of chit-chatting, way of words.
You mean like theorized?
Very unfair. Certainly from my point of view. In the last 20 years, America's been fascinated by theory. Whilst they were doing theory, the Europeans were getting on doing good buildings. End of conversation. It doesn't require any further explanation. They missed out. They died down their own rectum doing theory, and they lost out on architecture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they deserved what they got.
What did they get? I mean, what is America stuck with? Now?
America's stuck with well-read people who don't know how to design, and still have the echo of the Beaux-Arts somewhere in the back of the system.
With the work that you've done with the Bartlett or with ArtNet or with Archigram, it seems like really what your particular super talent is not necessarily bringing an institution into a body of knowledge, but creating a scene around it. You know what I mean? And that seems. And I wonder, what's the potential for doing that for a city? I mean, should we hire Peter Cook to make the city the next scene?
I think you should. Yes,
Yeah?
I think
Good idea.
I could make a scene around. I mean, I think it's true. Yes, I think that a scenery is exactly.
Well,
and because it's easier in some places than others.
Yeah.
I suppose you'd have to tease out some of the key people. I mean, I think you'd have to tease out the key people, and then you'd have to look at what's happened, in recent years. You'd have to look at where the potential for eccentricity is, and then you'd have to look for the potential of where things would have moved very quickly in that city, even if they were things that didn't interest you. Like you might find that they were, that there was a great instinct for sport, or you might find there's a great instinct for ballroom dancing, or you might find there's a great instinct for keeping dogs, or breeding chickens, or something that is really not my bag. But you'd have to roll with it and say, right, it seems to be that they are still peasants at heart and they like breeding chickens and dogs. Not my scene. I don't know much about this, but let's see. Is there some way in which you have an animal breeding thing, and you don't have very many French restaurants, which I would personally prefer, but you don't have many chamber orchestras, which I might personally prefer, but if they're into dog and cat breeding, let's see what that could mean. Yeah.